Hi there, it's Dr. Kathleen Cannon, and we're back with our vitamin alphabet. Today we're on vitamin B9, which is folate or folic acid. Folic acid is the synthetic form of folate, and the more active form of folate is known as MTHF, which stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate. I'm just going to say folate when we're talking about it here, but you know what I mean. Folate is super important for a ton of processes in your body. It's especially important for your DNA and your gene health and productivity appropriately. So what I mean by that is folate helps your DNA to be produced, and it also helps your DNA to be regulated. It's involved in something called the methylation cycle, which essentially is how your genes or DNA turn on and off to regulate growth processes in your body. As you can probably imagine, that's really important when we're looking at cancer risk and prevention. So folate is super crucial here. Folate is also important for how your blood cells mature and develop properly. And folate is essential for healthy fetal development, especially with regard to neural tube development. Now, there's something that you may have heard of called MTHFR mutations or variations, or SNPs, which stands for single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs, and SNPs is kind of fun to say. But MTHFR, so we're back to that acronym, MTHFR, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. The R stands for an enzyme. So this MTHFR variation that you might have heard about is related to variations in genes that have been more widely studied and are increasingly showing up on testing because, there's increasing amounts of testing done now, so we're going to see it more often. But it can give us a little bit of insight into a person's potential risks for disease. So for people who might have, and I'm just going to mention two of them, the two most commonly tested mutations or variations in this MTHFR gene. So the two most common, one is C677T, and it's more related, if you have variations in that, it can be more related to cancer risk and cardiovascular health. The other more common area that we see the MTHFR variations is in what's called A1298C, and those variations there, or those, if you have a SNP there, those are more related to neurological function. And then there are several other areas under that MTHFR gene that can have those SNPs. So just something to keep in mind, but folate and MTHFR, very, very important. So deficiencies in folate obviously are going to be really important. And the big area where we hear about issues when someone is lacking folate or lacking appropriate genetic expressions for that folate use, a big area of concern is cancer risk. So that's one big thing, and then we go back to what I mentioned before, which there's so much detail we could talk about here, but I'm going to keep it concise. So folate is also going to be important for your cardiovascular health, your neurological health. Deficiencies in folate can certainly impact different areas within these systems. Also for your blood cell health, so anemias, especially megaloblastic and macrocytic anemias, where your red blood cells kind of grow too large because they don't get the signal to turn off that cellular growth, which is back to what we were mentioning earlier. That can be related to folate deficiency. Of course, again, the neural tube development in a fetus, very, very important to have appropriate folate levels for that. Folate's also involved in your cognitive health. So you can have changes, mental, emotional changes, including anxiety, depression, fatigue, changes in just your cognition too. And then also changes in your skin health, your epithelial cell health, and impairments in your immune function. All of these things are some of the more common issues that could crop up with folate deficiency. So folate levels can be pretty easily tested with a simple blood test. You can also test homocysteine to get an idea of your body's folate status, and then there are other functional tests, both blood and urine, that can be done to assess your body's folate status. So folate is something that's really very readily, very easily tested for the most part, and those MTHFR SNPs that I mentioned are also pretty easily tested now. It's just a simple blood test or a saliva swab if you're you're doing, you know, a different type of genetic test, but very, very simple to test. But it is important that you work with a doctor who is able to guide you appropriately, and don't try to just kind of navigate this on your own, because there are other pieces to consider, other vitamin levels that play into your body's ability to use folate appropriately without other issues. So folate. Food sources of folate include citrus, beans and legumes, green leafy vegetables. I like to call them the leafies, but those dark green veggies like kale and collard, spinach, all those dark green leafies are nice sources of multiple vitamins, including folate. And then fortified foods. The FDA has mandated it for a while that certain foods have to be fortified. So you might see that label on a food, and when you look at the ingredients, you'll see folic acid has been added to the food. Those foods tend to be things like breads and cereals. You might see it in other foods also. If you have a zinc deficiency or you use alcohol often, that may impact your body's ability to absorb and use folate appropriately. And folate is a water-soluble vitamin, so if you are supplementing with it, you want to take it with food to help your body absorb it. And it can be beneficial to take the folate with other B vitamins to help with kind of that synergistic effect, especially when we're thinking about what folate's doing in the body, the methylation cycle, and all of that. So if you're thinking of supplementing with folate, check with your doctor, have a conversation to make sure that you are doing what's appropriate for you as an individual. I hope this information has been interesting and helpful. None of this is a recommendation. Always check with your doctor, and may you be well.